Hello, Rob. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Good morning, and lovely to see so many people here in Derby, the Museum of Making. What a fantastic venue for our board meeting, and great to have such a good attendance, not just from board members, but indeed from our partners across the region as well. If I can start, just to remind you that, of course, we've got today on our board recommendations for decision, and usual arrangements around voting applies, and I hope that we will make really good progress today, based particularly on the fact that making good progress today means that we can move on to launching our local growth plan this afternoon. So I do hope that we are all looking forward to that as well. Again, just reminding you that the usual arrangements in respect of the microphones, and that this meeting is being live streamed, so your attendance is accepting that you might appear on it, a star of the screen for the day. I'm going to start then with apologies, and I have received apologies from Councillor Graves, who I believe is being substituted by Councillor Bent, who hasn't arrived yet. Oh, okay. Is that right?
Yeah, he is being substituted. I didn't know he'd not arrived yet.
Okay, he should be sitting next to you.
Oh, of course.
Okay. And Kim Harper, as well, has given her apologies, and Charles, yes.
Councillor Lee, I'm standing in for Charles Adams, covering business skills.
Thank you very much. We welcome Councillor Adams. Yes.
Apologies from Paul Simpson.
And apologies from Paul Simpson. Thank you. With no other apologies, I'll move on. Declarations of interest. Councillor Beatfield.
Thank you, Mayor. I need to declare that I am a non-executive board member of Marketing Derby. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other declarations? Yes.
Following on from the Deputy Mayor's lead, can I declare that I'm the Vice Chair of Destination Chesterfield?
Okay, thank you. I'm very conscious none of these are pecuniary financial interests either, but thank you for declaring those. Public participation. We have two questions, but I think only one member of the public is here to ask. So can I invite Mr. Reid to come and join us at the table there? And if I could ask you, Mr. Reid, to read your question, please.
The EMCCA website says that The loop is a big part of the Mayor's plan to encourage active travel like walking and cycling. But a leisure route that's designed for walking may not be suitable for cycling, and vice versa. Routes that recreational cycling groups use for their rides are quite different from the routes that walking groups use for their walks. A bridleway that's okay in walking boots may be too muddy for cycling. As a precedent, EMCCA's Vision for Growth cites Portugal's Rota Vicentina. But as well as publicising walking routes, Rota Vicentina publicises a cycle touring route. Publicising a walking loop and an analogous but different cycle touring loop will enhance the visitor economy over a broader area than just publicising a walking loop. Is EMCCA open to publicising a cycle touring loop that's different from but complementary to the proposed walking loop?
Thank you, Mr. Reid. The concept of the loop is to help people get outdoors and active in our region and to help connect our places. As you might have seen, I've been walking the loop, meeting people as I go, and many people are following that across our social media channels. So I want to receive suggestions and contributions to our ideas and formal consultations. Some sections that I have walked on the loop are identified in the local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, the LC WIP, as some people might refer to it, as being routes that the councils would like to invest in. However, the notion of the loop is less about building new infrastructure and more about getting people active. We know there are real benefits to getting more people active, and that's the greatest health benefits that come from supporting those people who are currently inactive to do just a little physical activity, and walking is one of the best ways to achieve this. I am fully committed to improving active travel infrastructure in our region, and I'm working with our constituent local authorities to prioritise the funding we receive from Active Travel England and from DfT through the Transport for City Regions Fund into the highest priority schemes for active travel. I will expect new and enhanced cycling infrastructure that EMCCA invests in to meet the best design standards required by Active Travel England and to be inclusive and suitable for all. We also want the infrastructure to support people with the journeys they need to make, benefiting as many people as possible. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Reid?
I think you could do a cycle touring loop without new infrastructure by just providing GPX files. You mentioned suggestions and something else. To whom should suggestions be sent?
Well, I'm very happy if you want to submit any suggestions to me, and I'll make sure that appropriate officers working across the authority are able to pick that up, particularly with our partners in the constituent councils where appropriate. In relation to opportunities for promoting cycling as well, where it's possible on some parts of the loop, I've also taken to doing some cycling sections of it, and we hope that that will promote those areas where cycling might be possible too, even by a novice like me. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't think Mr. Lee is here, which was the second question, so that will be published on our website and available for people to see. On to the minutes of the last meeting. Can I first of all check that people are happy with those as a true record? Yeah. Thank you. No other matters that you wanted to pick up from those? Thank you. Did I see some? Oh, Kath, yes.
I just wanted to report that Mindforge, which was one of the agreements, has been in touch already with me, and so through Lisa Smith, and so we will continue to work on behalf of all universities, because I think that was one of the challenges in that meeting, in order to look at the next step. So just to have that as a note.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that update. Moving on to the mayoral update, I'd firstly like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the significant contribution of Emma Alexander, who the board will know has been part of the EMCCA journey from the outset. As the Managing Director of Derbyshire County Council, Emma has played a critical role in building the partnership that EMCCA represents, and I want to recognise that leadership, that support and good counsel that she has given throughout. Tameside Metropolitan Borough Council has gained an excellent leader, and all of us here at EMCCA wish Emma every success. This has been another busy month, as is always the case in this job. And just this weekend, I returned from a week-long trade mission to Japan, supported by Invest in UK University R&D Midlands campaign. We made the most of being there with visits to Kyoto, Toyota City, Osaka and Tokyo. And the visit to Toyota City was particularly meaningful because its links to our region through the factory at Burniston, at which we were able to see the new Corolla that the factory will soon be manufacturing, really brought to life the importance of those relationships. Derbyshire County Council and Toyota City and Derby City have nurtured this connection, building a relationship which has now endured for 30 years. And this relationship is a vital asset to the region. And it was important to me that this mayoral visit should be part of strengthening that, as well as the opportunities that we took to talk to potential investors, but also other businesses and partners in Japan that allowed us perhaps to give some further thought about how we take forward in the future opportunities for both inward investment and building relationships with businesses. Along with mayors from across England, I also attended a meeting with Phil Smith, the chair of Skills England. This link is a really important one to get right if we're to ensure that our approach to skills development and investment is joined up. Mayors of all parties are in consensus about the need for greater devolution of post-16 skills as a necessary condition to our regions being able to align skills provision to the needs of our businesses. And we'll be using the forum to continue to make the case for that. I was also pleased to attend September's meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for one of their regular mayoral Q&A sessions. While scrutiny of the mayor is wider than that, rightly, the role of the committee is incredibly important. And I know that there were also discussions about the local growth plan and our commission that came out of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee too. And it was an opportunity for me to hear some of that discussion. And following on from the public question earlier, for those of you who are interested in my progress on the loop, I've now reached Bevercote in Nottinghamshire and am tentatively looking forward to the next leg, which I think is a cycling route rather than a walking one. So hopefully encouraging people to look at all aspects of active travel. I'm very happy to take any questions or comments on the mayoral report. Rob.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo your comments about our leader, Emma, leaving. She's been a really inspirational leader in Derbyshire. We definitely will miss her and we thank her for her time. On the connection to Japan, I had the pleasure of going to the school in Derby for the Japanese kids who parents work at Toyota, and I have to really commend them. What a wonderful society, what a wonderful group, what a wonderful welcome we had. The connections between us and Japan are really strong and we must continue to foster that. So all good work.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Peatfield.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really thrilled that you've visited Toyota City, because having been there myself in 2023, it really brings home how important the connection is. And just how much work has gone in over many years to nurture that and foster that relationship. I'm equally delighted that you've met Mayor Otter, who is quite a personality and a really interesting character, and someone that I became very friendly with while I was over there. So I'm really pleased that you've had that experience so that you can understand how close our relationship is and how important it is going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's worth noting that obviously Toyota are the biggest of Japanese companies invested into Derbyshire or in this region, but they're not the only company. And there are certainly opportunities in the longer term for more investment, I would suggest. Kath.
Just to say on behalf of the innovation piece that many of the teams that were out there, I know from the University of Derby, someone flew back in on Friday but was able to talk about the opportunity for investment with a whole group of Americans as well. So, yeah, very positive feedback from the trip.
Great. Yes, Councillor Helsgrove.
Again, really pleasing to hear that we have this really good relationship with Toyota City. The potential for supply chains when the new Corolla comes on board is something we need to be mindful of. And cars in each iteration are more complex and therefore have more parts in them, not necessarily moving parts, but certainly parts which are innovative to saving fuel, all that kind of thing. And it'd be great for the local economy to benefit from that new innovation.
Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on then to item 6, which is the East Midlands Inclusive Growth Framework, and invite Damien Dacey to come and present.
Good morning, Board. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so for item 6, if I may just to say the following 3 and arguably 4 papers have a theme running through them, which is very much about the board's plans for the region. If the item 6, which is about the ambitions, what are the missions, what are the the long-term goals. Item 7 is the growth strategy to deliver many of those. Item 8 relates to the delivery architecture that underpins them, and then the following item on deeper devolution is arguably about how do we what does the future of devolution look like in the region to help accelerate all of that. So I'll start off as invited with item 6. So the board has in front of it to consider the content of and to consider its position with respect to improving it, what's called an inclusive growth framework. So this framework very much builds on the recommendations from the Inclusive Growth Commission, one of which very much talked about how to take a system, an area, a region-wide approach, and to set some clear goals around which partners in the region could all align. And those goals are set out in the single core mission within the framework, and then the 6 targeted ambitions that speak to economic and social improvement. So the purpose of the framework is sort of twofold, therefore. One of the things it does is to set for the board if you like, a North Star that helps shape decision-making, trade-offs, and investment prioritization. But the other thing it does, of course, is that when we say growth, as the board has talked about many times before, we inherently mean inclusive and equitable growth, which is about closing gaps, not just raising averages. So the decision for the board is to consider whether to approve the framework for launch and subsequent engagement, which I'll say more about in a moment, alongside the growth plan today. As I've said, the framework is intended to shape decision-making and strategy development, but it's a bit more than that. And I think it's worth just pausing on this for a moment, because the framework itself, and if the board will have read it within the papers published 10 days ago, but it's very much an invitation to collaborate to the region. So it is intended to be the board's view on what the future of the region needs to look like. But today, I think, is as much about the board saying, we agree with that, but it's also then saying, and this is an invitation for our partners across the region to collaborate with us on it. Going back to the Inclusive Growth Commission, the purpose being to drive collective action for what the board is able to influence, but also much broader. And that might, how to ensure that the framework gets purchase and input over time by wider partners in the region may be something the board may want to consider and discuss. The final point I would make is on recommendation B. You will see, and it's further set out in paragraph 3.3, the Inclusive Growth Framework was subject to a bit of a look at scrutiny on the 25th of September that the Mayor and I had the pleasure of attending. The recommendation from that scrutiny session is that local authorities in the region, and I'll make sure I get this right, have the opportunity to review the framework alongside the recently published report of the Inclusive Growth Commission, so that they are informally invited to provide feedback on how any of the evidence base or propositions could be improved or refined. So that is as you will see, the board is invited to accept that recommendation on the basis that it is both helpful and instructive to do so, and that we would do that through a process of structured engagement on the framework after today, if that makes sense. So we will set out a formal process for engagement across the region to local authority partners, but as I've already said, to partners beyond local authorities within the region. The purpose of that being to ensure that the framework is maintained as a live document and can continue to be applied in terms of decision making. So I hope that helps. That's item 6, the Inclusive Growth Framework.
Thank you very much. Open up now really for discussion or comment or questions. Councillor Peatfield.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's really, really positive that we're seeing this report come so quickly after the Inclusive Growth Commission report. I think it's really encouraging because we all attended that really fantastic event and spoke to partners and told them that it was really important that they get on board and they take part in this process. And this paper really starts to show how they can do that. So I think that's absolutely crucial that we're moving at pace with this and showing our partners across the region how they can engage and what it will mean when they do. At 2.3, where it breaks down not just the core mission, but the 6 targeted ambitions, I think it's really, really important that some of the words in there are actually quite emotive words, as opposed to, physical things that we're doing. So, like opportunity, a good life, and belonging are things that you feel, as opposed to something that is not always tangible. But I'm really glad to see that we're using that kind of language and not being overly technical in these things, I would say. The one thing that I think that we could, and maybe the overview and scrutiny's recommendation actually will play into this, but one thing I think that we could do more of is, I think it's probably quite self-evident how our larger institutions can engage, like your universities, NHS, etc. But when it comes to SMEs, I think there's probably still a bit of a barrier to understanding how they can engage, and where do they come in at the entry point, what is their contact, and what are the opportunities for SMEs. So I don't know if the overview and scrutiny recommendation will help with that, but I think that that's something that would be really useful for our SMEs. Thanks, Ms. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Jolly.
Yes, delighted to see this paper and the layout of how we intend to create a healthy well-being, etc., and in particular how to reduce the gradient of inequality that exists in the healthy life expectancy, which can be as much as 20 years, and indeed life expectancy about 10 years. And when we talk about reducing the gradient of inequality and closing the gap, we're basically talking about poverty, we're talking about improving standards and work, etc. I'm delighted to see that this is going to move from a collaborative North Star vision to an underground engagement, and I think that was the thing that was different today, that we're going to move from the stars to the ground and actually see some of the engagement that we've been calling on for quite some time. We have 4 health and wellbeing boards, and all of those have various concordats. They have mental health concordats, smoking concordats, and all of those will have to unite across D2N2 in order to be able to achieve what we're looking to try and achieve, which is an improvement in the population, so that they are fit enough to work, that they can get on the opportunity escalator that we talk about and improve things. One of the areas that I'd like to see a little bit of clarification on, and I've noted it in all aspects of new thinking, is the interlinking of what people call place, neighbourhoods and communities. they're used as the same thing, but they're not actually the same thing. Communities are not necessarily located in neighbourhoods, and communities can be online communities, they can be religious communities, there can be all sorts of communities that exist, have no relationship at all to neighbourhoods. And I think that that's one of the common challenges going forward, is that the language that's actually been used is increasingly confusing to people who haven't actually got a clue what is a place, what is a neighbourhood, and what is a community. I think we should be rooted in the concept of neighbourhoods. Neighbourhoods actually reflect areas and place, and the only difference in neighbourhoods is their size, whether it be 50,000 or 250,000. So a little bit of clarification around the terminology that's used. It's not semantics, it's real words that are being used by real people on a regular basis, and the vast majority of them simply haven't got a clue. But other than that, really good, looking forward to the on-the-ground collaborative working and a descent from the North Star. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor.
Thanks, Matt. I think just 2 points for me, if I may. I think in terms of sort of the ambitions, I look forward to sort of seeing them working their way through to sort of EMCCA's committees, in terms of that sort of being able to have a little bit of a greater look. But I think also as well in terms of sort of some level of target setting. I think, you know, for us to, although sort of the end ambition is to reach this goal by 2040, I think there's definitely a role for some of the committees in terms of that more detailed look at how exactly we set up the framework for that. Then I think probably the second point for me is the Mayor's Development Fund, which you launched relatively recently. I think I'd like to see sort of how the ambitions tie into that as well, because I think there's definitely some opportunity in terms of some of the work that some of the community organisations that I know are starting to come together to look at bidding for that funding could well sort of, you know, it could add an additional tool in terms of sort of looking at not only what are the things that they're bidding for in terms of that funding, but also how that funding helps to fit into that wider framework of the overall change we want to see. So how can it become more sustainable, but also does that sort of the pocket funding from yourself, does that help then to sort of leverage in some of that other funding that we can sort of utilise, or in terms of sort of some of the points within the ambition, sort of how we can try and focus them at a more local level, like sort of we've done with those communities, and just make sure they're involved and engaged and working through those processes. Thanks.
I think that's very helpful, and there is clearly a change in the way in which some of this is being developed, the policy, both what we're doing here with the Community Development Fund and looking to communities to shape what they need, so it's ground upwards, but also with the government's announcement of the Pride of Place funding, which across this region I think is 100 million across all of the locations. And that again is very much to be driven by what the communities, and I say the broader communities rather than just neighbourhoods, simply because I think the communities are more than just those neighbourhoods in those sets of circumstances. And I do understand what you're saying around the wording, but I think what connects people across neighbourhoods is sometimes a sense of a broader alignment to a town or to a district, in the same way as people, for example, in Mansfield will connect with being in Mansfield, but they will very much connect with being in Mansfield Woodhouse, for example. So I think there's an interesting challenge about how we address some of those differences. Paul, Councillor Hillsgrove, and then I'll come back, Damien, for you to pick up.
A common theme in the report in several sections is the issue of connected communities with regard to digital inclusion, and I think this is really important. I know it's a common theme, or a recurring theme certainly, when I visit the Business Advisory Board, that in some areas of EMCCA, let's say digital connectivity is patchy, and there are, you know, issues about that for SMEs and maybe for larger firms, and I think that's something that if it can be improved and when it will be improved, and it's a question there of Councillor Doddy's metaphor of the stars and the ground, and literally underground, by putting digital connectivity underground where possible. in rural areas in particular. I think that would be something that would improve all sorts of things, and health opportunities, all sorts of things are opened the door by better connectivity in certain areas of the authority, and I'm looking forward to progress on that.
Thank you. Kath?
Yeah, just I think a fantastic piece of work. I think that there probably is a challenge to be laid down now to the colleges and the universities on how they would work collaboratively in order to drive some of those ambitions. I think they're great ambitions. The bit that I'm really interested in, though, and this is probably a bit more personal, is about that belonging. And I do think the look and feel of our cities and some of our areas don't make you feel part of the environment we're in. I do think we have to make a little bit of an overview of how do our towns and our cities look and appeal to people. And I think, you know, we've got huge investors, we've got lots of students that want to come here, but they don't all stay. And I think some of that is about how we have displayed, put our wares on sale. And I think that does require a little bit more thought on. I don't think we're the cleanest cities and towns. I think something around that is something that gives a sense of belonging and pride.
Thank you. Councillor Khan?
Thank you, Mayor. So I welcome the progress made and the approach outlined, but I think for the general public out there, they don't understand, like, so you've got the inclusive growth report, you've got this framework, they think tomorrow suddenly change will happen, and I think there's a understanding the stages involved would be really helpful, because we've got to now put the metrics about how you will measure the progress made and how what potentially success will look like. But I did mention at the last board that as local authorities we've tried to crack this and we haven't been able to. So hopefully by coming together as a region we've got a better chance to do this. But I think it would be good if Damien could outline how this will progress, because there is going to need to be an outcomes framework as well. Lots of frameworks, aren't there, always in these things?
Inevitably. For no other comments, Damien, would you like to pick up on those?
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll try and run through some of the themes, and you know, I think as always with the point of this is just to clarify how the board wants to take this forward so we can support it. So there's definitely a theme about what the engagement looks like. I think so. The points raised about SMEs and also sort of, you know, engagement at the community level and ensuring there is the right voices within that. So we're really happy as we design that engagement plan, which is referred to in here. And we can bring that back informally to the board to ensure that we are getting the right representation across what is a big and complex region within that, if that's okay. So particularly on SMEs and, you know, community neighbourhood level voices. Councillor Doddy, you mentioned as part of it health and well-being. So obviously I think it's just worth noting that there is a mission in here which is about health and well-being and belonging, which very much speaks to you know, things like the improvement of population health as an end in itself, as opposed to, as picked up in the skills and work, the health and work agenda, because that's important in terms of building the right labour market to support our goals, if you see what I mean. You'll notice in the growth plan is very much about more the health and work agenda than it is about population health and reducing health inequalities. There is more that we need to do with our partners in health as the strategic health duty, which is in the bill, comes online, and the board will, of course, have its role to play in efforts to improve population health and reduce health inequalities for its own sake. So the growth plan doesn't speak to that explicitly, but it's mentioned in here because it is important, and there's more work that's needed to be done on that. The point about metrics, so I think that's a steer to say, and as noted in the paper here, if the board is happy with these missions and it's happy with the articulation of what they could look like in terms of how do we measure these over time, we will take the development of those metrics within an outcomes framework and ensure that the board and indeed the committees which support it have had a good chance to work through all of those. So, for example, Councillor Barton, you know, when we're talking about connected communities, how are we actually going to measure and track that over time? That would be something that your committee, I'm sure, would want to have some space and time to engage with before we bring it back to board. And the same would be true, Councillor Hazelgrave, on skills and employment, and so on and so forth. So really happy to build that into our plans for development of the outcomes framework. In terms of digital connectivity and inclusion, Councillor Hazelgrave, you mentioned that. It's come up a lot, right? One of the almost the first thing whenever we do these engagement sessions with people and other such things is that this is a region that needs to be better connected in terms of transport, but also digital. Second one is probably about skills and employment issues within the region. So I know that Councillor Butt and your committee has already started to do some early scoping work on what could a regional agenda be about digital infrastructure and inclusion with the support of my colleague Edward Highfield. And so I'm sure there'll be more for the board to commune on that over time. And then I think the final piece, and I'm happy to come back to sort of pride in place and other such things in the future, just how we articulate all of this, recognise there's a lot of moving parts, and as has already been said, this follows pretty much hot off the heels of the Inclusive Growth Commission. The way that we sort of explain it to ourselves internally is the Inclusive Growth Commission was that outside-in view. It was the sort of evidence base. It was that if you want to deliver inclusive growth, here's the route map. This is the board now deciding to deliver inclusive growth. And the first thing it would do is then say, through this framework, this is what we're trying to achieve. The next thing it would do is what's the strategy to get there, and that's what's in the local growth plan. The team have worked on a narrative with some pictures and diagrams and other such things, which will be online today. And we would really welcome the board's feedback on the clarity of that, and indeed, if it's not getting the traction that it needs, we can keep coming back to it.
Okay. Well, hopefully, when we move on to the local growth plan, we maybe look at some of a broader discussion on that. Okay. If there are no other comments, are you happy to adopt the East Midlands Inclusive Growth Framework summarised in the report? And accept the recommendations of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee around the engagement programme. Agree with that? Yeah. Thank you very much. We move then, so stay in place, Damien. We move then to the East Midlands Growth Plan. Damien, would you like to open up on that?
Thank you. So I'll keep this really brief. It is a longer document. It is a more detailed document. But in some cases, it's as I was just saying, its purpose is sort of narrower and deeper. It's a 10-year strategic plan to grow the economy, to get annual productivity up to the 2% growth rate, to add 13 billion to the economy, 100,000 more homes, 60,000 people more in work, and achieving the national target of an 80% employment rate. So up front, you'll see a series of ambitions, if you like, a series of metrics, perhaps is a better way of saying it. How will we know this plan is effective? I think the main thing that it does for the first time and in some depth is to put all of the work that has been developed already within the region and then on the regional agenda into one place. The plan is structured in 3 parts. There is a set of prescriptions around all of the things needed to grow the economy: transport, housing, skills, investment, business partnerships, innovation. So that's the sort of first chapter of it. There is then a second chapter, which is a set of choices the board is making to focus efforts on growing the economy in 5 sectors, including the visitor economy, and the other 4 aligning very much with the industrial strategy, or a subset of the industrial strategy, 8 sectors. And then the 4th is connecting all of that to a place-based approach that the board has seen before in the Vision for Growth and was announced at UK Reef earlier this year. So the idea is to try to find a way to connect all of those things together in a strategic plan to grow the economy over the next 10 years. So the decision for the board is whether it's happy to adopt this as our local growth plan.
Thank you. And I mean, I would like to take contributions and questions and comments, but I'm also keen to hear from members about how they think we can ensure that our partners right across the region, not just in the public sector, but private sector, key stakeholders, how we get them to engage in this as our plan for the region. Because the success of this depends upon it not being my plan, not being our plan collectively as constituent and indeed non-constituent councils, but being the region's plan. And we are far more in this region than simply those who are elected to sit round here and make those decisions. So I'd be really interested in your thoughts and comments on that as well. Okay, to open. Yes, Councillor Barton.
Well, is it on?
I think so. It's the green button.
That's it now?
Okay.
I totally agree. It is all our plan. There's some big numbers in here, and I think we need lots more detail behind it, and I know you're going to say that's probably coming later. But in 3.3, £13 billion larger economy, how we're going to achieve £5,700 income per year increase for residents, and at least 60,000 more people at work. Then we've got the homes, the new homes. It's just how achievable all these are. I know in a plan you've got to have an aspirational plan, and there's some big numbers in there. I would like to see a lot more detail, like you've just alluded to. How do we get out to businesses and articulate that to businesses? And I think these numbers could be deliverable, but we need a lot more information and a way forward how we do deliver that. Because obviously from our side at county, Nottinghamshire, we want to be involved in the transport, the skills, the business, the innovation, and this plan running forward, and the connectivity. So I'm fully behind it, but I do think we need lots more detail. And I know it's only a plan in its infancy, but I would like to be a part of that. But I have got some worries about some of those, and I know it's aspirational, but I have got some worries about some of those figures. Thank you.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Mayor. I suppose my observation on the question that you posed was something that I've been mulling over through the last paper and probably the next paper that we're going to talk about as well, which is the developing an identity for the East Midlands and for Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire. I think it's great today that we've actually I'm sat opposite some of the Nottinghamshire people with the Derbyshire people, and so it's good to mix back. But I still think, in terms of an identity, I don't think we're mixing that well. And I think if we're not mixing that well, if we're not talking about EMCCA, if we're not talking about Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire together, and contributing towards economic growth and making sure everybody feels a bit richer, feel that they can get connected better to different services. If we're not doing that, then it's going to be really difficult for people outside of this room to do that. And I think that's really one of the main challenges. And again, going back to the last paper, it's not really mentioned in the paper. In fact, I don't think it's necessarily mentioned implicitly in any of the papers, but maybe at some point, as EMCCA does mature, and it is maturing, that we do need to sort of deal with that challenge of embedding that identity into the people of Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, so that we feel like we are contributing to a cause, which is this cause, which is increasing economic prosperity for everybody, improved services, improved connectivity. Particularly, I might mention the comment made by Councillor Hazelgrove earlier about digital connectivity in rural parts. Some parts of our urban areas are not necessarily digitally connected very well, you know. So I think it is a question of just maybe we've got to find a way through the leadership of EMCCA to make more of and to embed that feeling of identity within the region more than what we're probably doing, and maybe we need to face that as a challenge explicitly and not just implicitly.
Thank you. Councillor Peatfield.
Thank you. I think a lot of your question as to how we engage and how that message gets owned across the region kind of links into the next paper, because we all have our different methods of reaching our communities, but whether it's business or otherwise, whether it's inward investment, whether it's business advice, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, or our own convening powers within the council and our partners, obviously that message gets filtered down, doesn't it? And it gets filtered down to the on-the-ground delivery stage. So it comes back kind of to my point of there's lots and lots of ways that we can engage, not just by us saying, okay, here's our plan, come to us and we'll tell you about it, but actually going to those bodies and visiting them and engaging in a different way. But also the point I made about those that aren't within those bodies. So Chamber of Commerce is absolutely fantastic tool, Marketing Derby, Invest in Nottingham, Invest in Chesterfield, etc. All brilliant, brilliant things, but not every single business is engaged in those structures. So there's so many tools to try and reach those people, and I think that the only way you can really do that is locally. Because you've got this big image, this big vision up here, and when it filters down, it's about delivery on the ground.
Thank you. David Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I say what I was going to say, responding to Paul, really, I'm obviously doing something badly wrong, because I'm neither elected nor paid, but EMCCA rather seems to have taken over my life. In terms of living, breathing this stuff, and the growth plan in particular. For the last probably 9 months, it's almost been an obsession, which Damien and Jamie Jordan and Jessie Buscombe and others are well aware of. So what I was going to say is, the headline you'll be pleased to know is that the Business Advisory Board fully endorses this local growth plan. And we have lived and breathed it, so that when I advertised the wonderful thing which is membership of the Business Advisory Board, I said it was 4 meetings a year, quite easy. We're probably having a meeting a fortnight at the moment, some of them ad hoc, to get into the meat of all of this stuff, so that business fully understands, business fully supports. When I talk about business, 80,000, 90,000 businesses in the region, I'm talking about on the board, people from Rolls-Royce down to micro SMEs. So all facets of business have been exposed to this plan, and all facets of business support it. We've driven very hard, and again, Jamie's aged by about 20 years, but we've driven very hard to make it as focused as possible, to make it actually, you know, we can see determinants in there, we can see where we're going, we can see where we need to create a body of evidence for what we're achieving. So when we launch it this afternoon, I will be proudly launching it, because it is a very good thing, I think.
Brilliant. Okay. Councillor McEwen.
Thanks, Matt. I think for me, in terms of how we connect it to people, it's that place-based approach. So I think that's take a lot of comment from sort of what Councillor Peacock was saying around sort of how do we get people to sort of identify or connect with that East Midlands image. There's a little bit to me of that's going to be really difficult. I know particularly for my neck of the world, yeah, it doesn't matter what we do as a region, folk are not necessarily going to, you know, recognise or connect with the East Midlands. I think particularly within the Vision for Growth that we've got, although we've identified sort of 7 overreaching areas, I think part of it is going to be looking down at those places individually, because whilst in some cases sort of, you know, parts of the Peak District are very much focused around tourism, you know, tourism, mining, etc. through the quarrying, they're not just those industries. There is a lot of micro business, and in some cases it will be around how we develop those connections to elsewhere. You know, to a certain extent, business, some of the smaller businesses and some of the businesses that we've been able to attract into the High Peak in recent years, and similar with Derbyshire Dales, is partly because we've got good connections through to Manchester Airport and the like, not necessarily East Midlands Airport. But in some cases, it's because we've got those connections and because there is that flexibility. So whilst there's an overriding sort of plan that certain areas will always be more focused on tourism or particular industries, I think having that flexibility and a place-based approach that we can sort of, you know, drill down as to whatever the support is needed in those particular areas, I think will serve us best as well. And to a certain extent, whilst I'd love for us to be able to say in 10, 15 years' time, by the time we've reached the end of the plan, for everyone to be saying, yeah, the East Midlands is great, I suspect we'll never quite get there. I think it's partly because it's more difficult. You know, some of the other regions, it doesn't matter. You know, if you look at West Yorkshire, it doesn't matter how much they'll focus on particular parts of it. Everyone will always focus a bit more on Leeds, because they're seen as being sort of those key connections. And I think to a certain extent, as long as we're making sure we've got the support right, and we know, and sort of our partners know that it's come from the County Combined Authority, yeah, it may well be that we don't end up as a doorstep name, but if that change has been made, then the job's been done. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris Jenkinson.
Thank you, Matt. I know that my colleagues in the TUC have written to you and a separate cover welcoming the recommendations of the Growth Commission, and I'm fairly confident that that acceptance also runs through the framework and into the growth plan. And we are particularly pleased to see focus on skills and employability. And within the growth plan, obviously, the kind of local skills improvement plans are essential, both in the context of the opportunity escalator, people who are in work now, how do they move into more secure, more rewarding, better paid jobs in the future, but also a recognition that we're in a transitional economy, whether that's transitioning to a low carbon economy, or whether it's AI, or whether it's autonomous robotics. These are huge shifts in the economy that may not be necessarily the case, but certainly has the potential for significant job displacement activity. We are seeing that in subsectors already, and therefore I think that these plans need to root themselves in the lives of those working people who are going through that transition at the moment, and that as we get into more detailed plans and metrics, we don't lose sight of the stories of real people and what their journey is like. So if you are a warehouse operative at the moment in the M1 corridor and you lose your job because that plant is currently going through an automation, how do you move into a new sector? And what are the pathways available to you? And how have our interventions assisted in that journey? And what does that endpoint look like for those people? Because I think that those real stories of real people, their lives, their families, and their communities are actually what we're about. And sometimes, you know, I don't think we always articulate that in the context of, you know, strategic plans and policy documents.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gilby.
Thank you, Mayor. Just building on what Councillor McEwen said earlier about the importance of place, I think it's really important that we show people what this plan is going to mean to them, and we have got some really early opportunities to do that, especially with the East Midlands Investment Zone. I'm not going to say too much because I'm hoping to be at the launch this afternoon to say more, but part of the East Midlands Investment Zone is in Staveley, which is part of the borough of Chesterfield. The Hartington Industrial Estate is ready to take business now. Our town deal put in an electricity supply so that it can meet the demand, and what we're going to be able to do there now with the support of the EMCCA growth plan is give businesses an opportunity to start in Staveley with very advanced and attractive terms to build new businesses, which will then give the people of Staveley the opportunity to get more jobs and better jobs for themselves, and that would not necessarily have been possible without this plan. We see so many estates of this nature being built and then just covered with warehouse sheds, especially when they're close to key routes, as indeed the East Midlands is, because it's at the crossroads of the country. So I think that we will be able, through this plan and the funding that has already been put behind it by the Mayor, to see some early results. We get the people of Staveley engaged, and then we start telling the rest of the East Midlands where activity is happening, because it won't all be happening in Staveley, of course, about this and how it has changed lives in parts of the region and how it's got the potential for everyone to have a better life because of this plan in the East Midlands. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelgrove.
I'd just like to come back to one of the words Damien mentioned, which was belonging. And I think a sense of belonging is something we'd all like to see in people's neighbourhoods, in their street, to their business, to their school, particularly to schools, and children feeling that they're valued in that place. And I think this, the three pillars here, particularly the place-based approach, is going to be essential in getting that sense of belonging. And that comes, pride of place comes through all sorts of things, but when we get people feeling in their pockets and around about in their environment, their localities, that things are getting better, then they're going to start thinking, right, well, who is responsible for this? Is it the council? Is it EMCCA? Is it just something that's happening anyway? And that's where comms comes in, isn't it? We've got to really have a really skillful comms team that puts out the message, but also works with all our authorities. We agree with this and we want it to work. We also want people to know how it's going to work, etc. So a key thing, I think, is for comms to work with all our constituent authorities and councils to get across some key messages in very simple terms, but also talking about what our plans are. And the last point I'll make, we have LGR going on with lots of flux in terms of certain levels of governance, but through all that, and we don't know how it'll emerge because there are all sorts of decisions to be made, EMCCA still remains. People may be in a different authority with which they feel no sense of identity, but they are part of EMCCA. And that's a chance for us to really, in that vacuum, kind of reassure people that, you know, you may be in a new authority, but you're a part of EMCCA, and EMCCA's got an ambitious plan to make things better for you.
Thank you. Councillor Rini.
Thank you, Mayor. Got to say the Derbyshire team do really welcome this. The ambitious targets here, 13 billion larger economy, 5,700 real income growth, and over 200,000 more people having higher qualifications over the next 10 years. These are all really laudable targets and they'll be welcomed. You asked earlier how we can all help push this forward so that people can engage, and my experience from a lifetime of sales is that plans such as this, it helps if you completely believe in them and that we've all had a hand in building these targets together. So belief in the product is key, and as I say, we very much welcome all of this. The only one where I have very slight concern is the housing numbers, which, although they are part of the current plan, I'd like to see far greater detail on. I have the background figures to hand, and the Office of National Statistics shows that completions in Derbyshire are around 3,500 a year, whereas this target is 5,200 a year. And in particular, some of the regions, particularly Chesterfield, Derbyshire Dales, Erewash, High Peak, of all receiving targets of more than double what they're achieving. So I'm really keen that they're not actually demotivated by plans that are considered unachievable. Actually, South Derbyshire, by chance, is building 400 a year more houses than it's targeted for. So, you know, there is, for me, it's a detailed thing, but I'd very much like to get into that, make sure those targets are achievable, really. Friend from Newark referenced identity and working together, and I think that's important. EMCCA is a new group, and it's good to have bold and ambitious plans that we can all drive for. One of the things that I'm working on is bringing the film industry into the area, and the stat that I receive is that 1%, less than 1% of what we see on all our TV screens is filmed in the East Midlands currently. That's a stat that, with your help, I'd like to improve, because the more images we get of the East Midlands and how marvellous it is, the more people want to come and work here, and that will help with many of these targets. So very much welcome this. As I say, the only slight concern for me is around the housing numbers, and I'd very much like to engage with your team to make sure they're kind of balanced fairly.
Thank you, and we will come back, I'm sure, to a more detailed discussion on that. I would simply say, in broader terms on housing, that every single authority needs to stretch further to deliver it, because if we want people to come and live in this region, they've got to be able to have the homes that they can afford. But actually, it's also about the homes for people who are already living here. And far too many of the sons and daughters and grandchildren can't afford to live in these communities, and because there aren't the homes, affordable homes particularly, or even social housing. And it's absolutely essential, in my view, that we not only should be ambitious as a region on housing, but we should hold feet to the fire to make sure that it happens. And I will never be afraid of being ambitious on these things, because frankly, if we didn't quite meet the £13 billion larger economy in 10 years' time, and maybe just missed it, I'd be very happy to defend that position because of what it actually would have done in reality. And that's exactly the same in relation to housing figures. If we just missed it, I'd be very happy to defend the fact that it would have created and built thousands more homes across our region, given access to homes for people in our communities, as well as for new people who will come and get the jobs that we're going to create in this region. And I think it is important that we maintain that sense of ambition, because people expect it from us, and they expect it because in this region there hasn't been enough opportunity to drive that ambition over the last few years, and it's the reason why we haven't got the things that we deserve in this region, is because we haven't set out ambitious targets and had a plan to deliver on how we get there. So you're absolutely right to expect more detail, and more importantly, I would expect you and your authorities, all of us, to be part of determining how that happens and work together on it. But I have no issue with a full challenge on how do we get to that point on it. I think I've still got another couple people who'd like to come in. Councillor Peacock again and Councillor Carl.
Sorry, mate, I'm probably going to echo what you just said about housing targets. That 100,000 figure and also the individual district-wide or local planning authority targets are based mainly on the demand that we've got to meet, and it's also, from my point of view, it's a demand which kind of unlocks more affordable homes. I think the government's taking measures to make it easier for developers to crack on, and certainly my experience for the last 6 months has been there's more developers coming to us as a local planning authority saying we want to crack on as well. So I think these figures, it's a 10-year programme. Councillor Rini says we've got to believe in these we've got to believe in these targets. Well, that starts now. And I think if Derbyshire's completing 3,500 a year now, we've got to push that bit more to make sure they get up to their 5,000. Nottingham should get up to their 5,000, and then, lo and behold, in 10 years' time, we'll not be far away from that target. So I think you're right. I think we need to take on that ambition. I'm not necessarily sure that's the most challenging ambition of those there, if I'm honest, but it's probably one of the most important things that we do as a region is get more homes built for those people that need them, so that those people can afford them as well.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got Councillor Khan, then Councillor Doddy.
Yes, I just want to put on record our thanks to you and your team for keeping the local authorities engaged in this process. This isn't a number that you're chucking on us. Our officers have worked very closely with you. I think some leaders forget that actually we have our own growth plans locally. It's great strategic alignment to that, and I think there's nothing wrong with being ambitious. Because for far too long, I think, if we think about the region, in some areas people obviously deliver more and others don't, so I think it's great that we're actually all being ambitious, and if we're serious about having growth and inclusive growth, then we've all got to step up and play our part in that.
Thank you. Councillor Doddy.
Yes, measurable ambitions. You could, of course, at the end of it all, Mayor, you could actually overachieve. And you could be looking at 14 billion rather than 12 billion. So think positively.
That's the kind of attitude I like, Councillor Doddy.
We'll share the extra billion. When I look at the question from last week from David Reid, and I look at him talking about spatial planning and transport and growth, and he asked a simple question about how do you actually keep them coordinated so that the houses that you build are the right number of houses for the development that you've got, that your house building doesn't get ahead of you, that your infrastructure doesn't get behind you. And he simply asked that question in terms, what do you do when things lag behind? And this really is a juggling act of keeping 10 balls in the air, and it's just how you actually keep an eye on the progress of all of those things in some sort of interacted way, rather than having 100,000 houses and no industry, that sort of idea. But I'm still focused on the 14 billion, Claire.
Wonderful. Even more ambitious. I like it. Okay, Councillor McEwen.
Thanks, Mayor. I think I'd be remiss coming from where I come from without flagging as part of that challenge around housing. Yes, we want more, particularly more affordable housing, but for some of us, we're both blessed. And I'm not sure of the appropriate word sometimes, but we have the Peak District National Park, particularly for ourselves and Derbyshire Dales, and they both welcome and a challenge, particularly when looking at some of those housing numbers, and just to a certain extent, having land flat enough to be able to build on in certain places. I think the model that was used at UK Ruth sort of perhaps exaggerated it just a little, but did highlight some of those particular challenges that we've got around housing. And I think as well that infrastructure challenge as well. I think we're starting to address that by bringing together the Mayor's transport plan, which I know is due to go out to consultation soon. And I think some of it will help to sort of highlight some of those challenges. But I think they're both. In terms of sort of that wider ambition, it's great to have a high target, but I suspect in some places we will need to sort of shape that by how well we can work with some of our partners. Because in some cases, I suspect the Peak would be quite an interesting group of people to try and work with you trying to get housing, and that's with the limited numbers that they take at the moment. And I suspect we'll have similar challenges sort of going forward in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm very conscious that in some areas it's easier than others. But we also know that there are rural communities where it's simply because they are chocolate box, beautiful places, the price of those homes means that local youngsters are absolutely priced out of being able to stay in the communities they were born and brought up in. And that has to be something that we recognise as well as, as the challenge of finding that land and space, and think innovatively about where we engage, and we engage all our partners and find that solution. Councillor Adams.
Of course, the other side of the pie about making affordable homes is about improving people's incomes. Homes in the East Midlands are already one of the lowest price in the whole of the UK. So, there's only so far that builders can go with their costs, fixed costs. So it's about improving people's incomes that will really make the difference and make homes affordable.
Absolutely. But particularly looking at the opportunities by having an increased supply of them as well. I'd finally, just to pick up an earlier point, Councillor McEwen, I'm really conscious, and always have been, that this is a region that doesn't focus always on the centre of the region or on our cities, and that if you live in both North Derbyshire or certainly the High Peak, or even in North Nottinghamshire, you will often look to the cities in South Yorkshire or to Greater Manchester. And this is about recognising where people are, where they live, and their own lives. But it's for us to try to find the way in which we can improve those lives when they are living in these communities, and the ways in which we provide work opportunities and travel opportunities and connect all of those things together. And that's the key opportunity, I believe, that the Combined Authority has that we haven't had in the past. Councillor Bent.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one thing that worries my constituents considerably. In the Amber Valley region, we've got a lot of under-investment with regard to the transport structure, infrastructure, and the number of houses that are going up at the moment and the congestion that they're causing is something we need to get round. We need planning for bypass roads, for an example, and to improve and upgrade the roads that we've got. And I think we'd get a lot more people on board if we went down that road, planning it so that they're not so inconvenienced.
And I would agree that when we are planning where this is precisely the reason why we're looking at spatial planning, which is about not just putting homes in, but thinking about where those homes will connect to and how they connect to jobs, to skills, to hospitals, to public services as well. And that's an important piece of work that we will work in partnership across all of our partners, both constituent and non-constituent councils. Damien, there was a lot in there. But I invite you just to pick up anything that you feel would be helpful.
Yeah, I guess then, with a view to things the board will want to continue to engage on. I mean, there's lots in there, and thank you for the fulsome debate, and also to reflect back, and thanks to David and the Business Advisory Board and Jamie Jordan and others for all the work that's been done in to develop this plan. There were two things really. So one, this conversation about the metrics, so the 13 billion, the 100,000 homes and other such things. So to connect that back to the conversation we've just had, so we will now, the board has agreed, or about to I think, agree this plan. We will ensure that both the delivery planning, to your point, Councillor Barton, and the performance management, if you like, of them is embedded within how we keep track of the impact that is being had in the region going forward. And of course, there is a significant role there to take the previous conversation with respect to the committees. So on the transport one, the housing one, within the growth plan, there is a set of actions which are set out that will start to make an impact in the achievement of those. But it's not a one and done. We've done the strategy and that's it. Wait 10 years and reap the benefits of 13 billion. It's a lot of work between now and then, and that will be a collective effort from the board. So just to acknowledge really the work that's needed on delivery planning and also assurance on impact for the metrics. I guess the other one, if I may, the conversation about identity I thought was really helpful and fascinating. Just two things which jump out of that with going back to the plan. So one is the plan, hopefully, at the beginning, middle and end of it, does speak to the particular circumstances within the region. It's a large region, as people often say, it's a polycentric region. There's a lot of variety in terms of economic and social conditions. The nature of that, I think, is hopefully there within the plan, and also needs to be reflected in how the board then takes forward its plans for transport, how it takes forward its plans for housing, recognising that, as you were saying, not all of the places in the region are the same, and there is a difference there. So hopefully the plan does that. But just on a sort of arguably a surface level, but obviously within the plan very meaningful, the title of the plan is Delivering a Fairer, Inclusive Future. In the spirit of, but also in the substance of, delivering a form of growth that is not just about improving averages, but is also about closing those gaps to deal with the inequalities within the region. And I think, if I may say, I think it's, of the growth plans I've seen so far, is the one that is the most distinctive in that way. So maybe there is something, Councillor Peacock, to your point about identity, maybe there is something in that. And it may be something the board wants to consider further, even in a less formal space. Yeah, how do we understand ourselves in this region, and how do we take it forward? So thank you for the debate, obviously, and over to you.
Thank you very much. So can I therefore ask you to approve the local growth plan? Yep, great. Thank you very much. We move on then to item 8, Damien's still in place. Review of the Regional Economic Development System. Damien.
Thank you, Mayor Clare. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is a bit more about the delivery, if you like, the delivery architecture to do the things that are set out in the growth plan, particularly around economic development and improvement. This paper, admittedly, is a bit of an update on the basis that there will be subsequent decisions for the board to take about investment in that system, not for today, but to be guided by the debate that is being had today. The board in February, I think it was, asked for this work to happen. And so that work has been happening. As always with these things, today it's as intensive as it has been, and there is a lot of engagement and discussion happening across the region on what to do next in terms of the institutions, the infrastructure around economic development within the region. To acknowledge why that's so important, and as was unknown at the time when this piece of work was initiated, is that there is a funding cliff edge for much of this infrastructure, which kicks in on the 31st of March, triggered by the decision made by national government in spring statement to withdraw UK SBF funding nationally. So government is nationally withdrawing grant for economic development from the system. The impact of that for our region is £25 million, of which about 17 million of it is the sort of revenue funding that a lot of the institutions are supported from. And obviously it is very, the board today doesn't have a draft budget in front of it, but obviously it's going to be very difficult for the board to replace all of that lost funding. Because there isn't any alternative funding source. Now, some of that funding is potentially will be replaced by a very capital-heavy fund, but we don't know if this region is going to get it, which was announced at the same time as the withdrawal. But what seems very likely is that that £17 million of revenue is no longer going to be funded. So therefore, there are increasingly challenging questions about what is to be funded, therefore, to support the goals set out in the growth plan. We are looking at that now. There is a lot of work happening. I think the business board took a meeting on this on Friday. There is engagement with the constituent authorities and wider this week, as there was last week, and there will be next week too. So just to finish, the paper effectively sets out an update on that work, going back to February and what has happened since. There are some principles set out in paragraph 3.8 to guide some of the options which are currently being developed and will need to be evaluated for subsequent decision by board. The options at first glance feel a bit general, but I would encourage and just invite a little bit of a sort of lingering on them because they're arguably less general than they sound. So, for example, in paragraph 3.8, A and B speak to very clearly whatever investment is made in the architecture for economic development flowing from the commitments made in the growth plan. Okay. Number C emphasises maintaining current capability as much as possible so we don't lose infrastructure along the way. That feels important, so we're not having to rebuild stuff which is lost, because it's a lot easier to lose it than to build it back. And then E and G speak to the necessity for considering capability in the round. So not just investing regionally, but also how does that regional capability work, I think, Councillor Peterwood, you were referring to earlier, to the sub-regional, to the more local capability, because on any of these things you need both. To land in with investment, you need both. So the principles are there. Obviously, it's helpful for the board for us to get some engagement on some of them. I guess the sort of operating principle of all of the review is that the growth plan, as we've just said, has a lot of ambition in there. And so business as usual, keep going as we've been doing, will not do. It's increasingly hard to do that with less funding. So we are trying to do more with less. That's the update on the review. There is more work to happen for subsequent board decision, but I hope that gives the board enough confidence that this work is being considered and intensely at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Damien. Can I start with David Williams, please?
Thank you, Mayor. As much as I waxed lyrical about the last agenda item, I'm probably taking the opposite position on this one. There is an expression, we are where we are, but it's really not good enough here. Where we are is we have a true cliff edge. Many of the organisations who are providing the various elements of support are already considering their redundancy programmes. Their staff are already leaving for other jobs because there is so much uncertainty. And we've set ourselves up to fail, I fear, in that we've created a wonderful growth plan and we're about to chop ourselves off at the knees by not having the tools to actually work out that growth plan. I totally understand the funding arrangements or lack of funding arrangements, and that goes in with we are where we are. But we've got some really heavy decisions to make, I think, and for me it feels sitting around this table, this is the first really crunch item we've had to deal with, which is to what extent is these areas of support, which are export support, business growth support and inward investment, to what extent do we prioritise this investment? To what extent does this come before anything else? Now, from a business perspective, if you're not supporting businesses to grow, I don't see how you can be standing behind a local growth plan. If you're not helping business to export, I don't see how you can stand behind a local growth plan. And then you have, and Councillor Pickfield and Councillor Gilby will be chiming in on this any time now, I suspect. We have all the good work being done by the local agencies, Marketing Derby, Invest in Nottingham, Des Chairs, all of them doing brilliant work, and we could be about to throw that away. Now, the problem, I will shut up in a minute, but the problem is this cliff edge is actually not next March, it's the November board meeting. There are now only 2 or 3 weeks before, I suspect, before the papers need to be ready for the November board meeting. I do not see how we can get in a position to make decisions at the November board meeting inside 2 weeks when all we've got is a pretty general set of propositions from some consultants who have, I think, let us down quite badly. So I'm not in a good place with this, but we've got an amazing opportunity to grab something if we can, but in a short period. It's just weeks, not months. End of speech.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Yeah, I'd probably just echo everything David said, but also say this is probably the area that's the biggest concern, because you've got 5 months left before the UK SPF fund comes to an end. You've got people's jobs, there's skills, there's knowledge, and if we're serious about, like David's just said about the growth plan and stuff, these are the people that have the experience and the knowledge. And my only concern is, like David was saying, people, looking at other jobs, redundancies, just stay, and if we lose that knowledge, then we're going to try to do something. We're going to have to recruit people again, and I understand the kind of regional level, but there has to be that local focus. I'm really concerned about how we sort this out. This isn't obviously something you've come about, it's the money coming to an end, but yeah, I'm really just, this is one area that keeps me awake, if I'm honest.
Councillor Doddy.
Thanks very much. It hasn't kept me awake yet, Councillor Campbell. Who knows? It could happen at some stage. The Shared Prosperity Fund. I was looking for some sort of an appendix that might actually give me an understanding of where it all went to. I might have missed it when I was going through. Is there sort of an appendix as to who gets the money, who's going to miss the money, who's going to suffer because of the lack of inward investment? Is it all grants? Is any of it in any other form? I think David was sort of touching on it. I still don't have any idea what the 25 million is supporting at the present moment in any detail.
So you might as well answer that now.
I can do that very, so at a high level, about 40% of UK SPF goes on, it's more capital funding, high streets, town centres, asset improvement, economic and community assets. Okay, so that tends to be more where the capital funding goes, but about 40% of it goes on that. About 40% of it goes effectively on support to business, inward investment, visitor economy, that kind of sort of a bit more sort of traditional softer economic development functions. And then about 20% of it actually goes on skills, employment support, but local level, not the Connect to Work programme or Adult Skills Fund, so more sort of community based.
They're all effectively grants.
It's all government grant funding, yeah. Most of which, about 50, it ends up crowding in about 50% more match funding, often from other parts of the public sector. But overall, yeah, does that help?
And obviously, when we were created, UK SPF was in existence and was extended. It was due to finish in this year and was extended by the government for a further year. So it had already been planned to finish in March 2025. And the government announced last year an extension to it. But the money, instead of going to the local authorities direct, came effectively to the combined authority to distribute. And that's where we decided, working with our partners, where those priorities were, but knowing that not only had they already been told that they were due to lose the funding in 25, but they were then given a further year of existence of that fund. So those are projects which have, often been on a kind of an expectation of finishing for the last 2 years, effectively. And that's why we are now in this situation of making decisions, because we inherited that 1 year of having to distribute that funding. Councillor Peatfield.
Thank you. That's kind of the crux of the challenge here, isn't it? That actually the UK SPF fund was something that the government put in because we came out of the EU. Previously, the pot was a lot bigger and it came from the EU to us. And so UK SPF was a much, much smaller replacement of that. And now it's gone completely. But my question really is, so the government, we know that the government extended this for a year when they came into power. But what would we have done last year had they not extended it? We'd have been in that position a year ago. So we're looking at this as a loss of funding, but actually this is the most crucial point of EMCCA's existence. If we're not focused on growth, then, or we're not funding the growth, then what are we doing? And I'm really concerned that, where is the funding to make the last two papers, these structures and the growth plan happen? And David mentioned about a matter of priority. Obviously, growth is huge, and then part of that, the subset of the growth, 1/5 of that is the visitor economy. So again, and we can't have growth without the skill set, etc. So all of this stuff that we've got happening now, we can't let fall off a cliff edge. It's already happening, albeit disjointed, and we've all, as a board, acknowledged that there needs to be a better way to deliver it. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's a lot of good stuff that is already working, and we need, as stated in the paper, we need to take the best practice. recognise that we've all got unique local structures that make it very, very complex, and I completely understand that. But, you know, some of those structures involve private investment, so some of it isn't even in our gift to decide. You know, we've got to work in partnership with some of these structures to make sure that we can achieve what we need to. And also, I think that this is so important that we can't rush it. And I'm really concerned that, you know, mentioning that cliff edge, which is coming, if some of these structures can't continue to be funded, they will either evolve into something completely different. We will lose all of that skill set and local knowledge, importantly. It's not just the skills, it's the passion on the ground about how people feel about their local areas. And so all in all, I think that we need to extend and make sure that as per 3.8C, we do ensure the ongoing capacity for continued ongoing delivery of economic improvement. But our structures, our external structures, need to understand what that looks like quite quickly. Otherwise, they're not going to be there. And as it's been pointed out, we're going to have to start from scratch. My last plea is that we don't deal with this in one big bulk, because some may be a little more simple than others. The business support delivery, the localised business support delivery may, I'm not saying it is, but it may be slightly simpler than looking at the complex structures of inward investment and also the structures of the visitor economy. For example, when it comes to the current funding of the visitor economy, it's very unequal. It's not equally funded across the region, and I know that needs looking at. So it's a mixture of, I know that this needs to happen, but please can we take more time and be really, really careful about it so that we don't cause damage along the way that will be irreparable. Thank you.
Thank you. Kath Mitchell.
Yeah, the piece for me is somebody that's utilised that inward investment for the last 10 years to transform my university. I haven't even been consulted, in a sense, and I think that that's sort of something interesting in that, you know, the way we work with that inward investment, the way we've been able to deliver skills very differently, the way I've got a nuclear skills academy in my city, the way I've been able to get a business school, that is fundamental because of the way that we worked through that type of an approach. And the bit for me is, what I couldn't see in the paper is, where is that approach for me now? Because no one's come to ask me my view on that. And we're not just education deliverers, you know, we're deliverers of skills, we're deliverers of big providers of jobs in our region. And so from my point of view, it's more about, I can't feel how that would get replaced to have the impact that what I've had to date has had the impact with not large sums of money in reality. And so I suppose that's my challenge on, I don't quite know what it would look and feel like, and I don't feel the paper tells me that.
And Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just somebody who's actually seen the benefit of many of the schemes within the UK SPF. I'm sure people around this table have heard me sort of say how effective it's been, certainly in my neck of the woods, but probably right across all local authority areas that have taken advantage of it. So some things I'd say about the UK SPF is that it's worth much more than what the amount of money that's been put in. So to take money away and not have that money in the future is clearly not just taking that investment away, it's taking the outcome of that investment away into the future. And I think it's probably an imperative of us, I think, listening to what people have said in this debate, is that we don't want to lose that kind of model, we don't want to lose that kind of funding. Some parts of there are differences right across different local authorities in terms of how they've used the model and how effective they've been. At the very least, we should be looking at where areas of good practice have been and defining that model and supporting that model right across the region in maintaining that, because, as I say, the value added by the extra pound is much more than a pound coming in. but also the value of relationships across local authorities and across private and voluntary sector organisations shouldn't be lost going forward. Is it an imperative of this board to say we need to spend some time to look at how we replace these things, and have we got time to do that before the plug is pulled next year?
Okay, I'm going to take last contribution, Councillor McEwen. I'm very conscious of time. We've still got quite a bit on the agenda, so I need to move on swiftly.
Thanks, Matt. I think for me, the potential challenge, I think, is it seems sort of we were aware of this deadline coming, and it seems by having that extension of funding for a year, if anything, it's not necessarily helped. I think we've all made great use and great benefit of the funding that's been made available, but I think that has put off some decisions that should probably have been taken 12 months ago, or at least the preparation for. And it does seem in some cases that some of these wider bodies covering the whole of our region don't necessarily seem to have taken the threat of that funding coming to an end, with it being extended for that further year, possibly as seriously as they needed to. And in some cases, some of those plans don't seem to be, you know, at least at this point from the details in the paper, they're not as developed as I thought they might have been, given that we knew this deadline was coming. And I think in some cases it may well be necessary to sort of pull some of these groups together, which in some cases are duplicating some bits of effort in some of that, and how do we get best for bang for buck across the region. But I think that, you know, the biggest challenge for me, we will lose out on some stuff in local communities, but I think for me, keeping those infrastructure organisations in place as best we can, but it also needs them to step up to the plate. And I think in some cases, the fact that there was an extension of money just seems to have stopped some of that work on working out what was the best plan. Thanks.
Well, maybe some point in that, but, you know, we have been saying it, and we did make it clear in the distribution of funds last year. So ongoing discussions have been taking place with officers, with partners, and with other authorities. Damien, can I just ask you just to pick up the last few points?
Yeah, very happy to. So Kath, on the point about role of universities, I mean, obviously the local growth plan with respect to skills, but also with respect to investments, talks to the role of universities in promoting urban investment. And, you know, obviously the mayor has just been to Japan and other such things. So yes, but I think on the delivery of that with respect to these functions, point made, if there's been a gap and not engaging with yourselves and others, we'll fix that. As we do the current work around options development and evaluation. I think, without putting the cart before the horse, some of the element around SBF, some of the value, Councillor Peacock, you were talking about, on capital investment, because of course, yeah, SBF had an element of capital funding within it. Obviously, the Combined Authority does have capital funding, as it talked about at its last meeting. We are currently doing a round of project identification for capital funding, as we know. So there's probably more potential for the Combined Authority to take some of the learnings on SBF with respect to some of the more capital-heavy projects. The revenue stuff, there's no doubt about it, it is very, very tight. It's very difficult to substitute £17 million worth of revenue funding. And so therefore, I guess, David, to your point about what are the priorities which need to be made. So we will continue working on what the model is, and if the board is happy with these principles, we will do some of that. Obviously, that work is very intensive at the moment. Absolutely for the board to decide when it wants to make that decision. Obviously, the budgets for next year are not set, and they're not set, I don't think, on the timeline until January. So if the board wanted to make a funding commitment, the board would have to do that before January. Anything above £500,000, I would defer to Sanjit, but is a board decision if it's not agreed in budget, which it wouldn't be because it's not set, if you see what I mean. So maybe that points to taking a subsequent item in November or indeed in January.
Okay, thank you. This is based on the principles that are set out in the paper. Can I ask for your support, therefore, on the recommendations, acknowledging and supporting the work currently underway, approving the principles to guide the collaborative work, and noting the future models and potential funding arrangements? Happy to approve those. Thank you very much.
Sorry, may I?
Yes.
Just on my point about asking for more time, I just wonder if we could just have a bit more of assurance on because we still don't really understand if we're going to have to come to a crunch point in November, or whether
So
my
I think,
point about
we
needing...
can come back and have a further discussion in November and decide at that point. So once there's a bit more conversation taking place with the partners.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on then to item number 9, established status application. Amy.
Thank you, Mayor Clare. This is hopefully a relatively straightforward paper for Board's attention, which is seeking your endorsement for the East Midlands Mayoral Combined Authority to move forward with a submission to government for us to be considered as an established mayoral combined authority. So as many of you know, of course, our original proposal agreed by our constituent, devolution proposal agreed by our constituent authorities and by government in 2023 set out the parameters of our current devolution deal. We have obviously subsequently to that time benefited from additional funding and opportunities from government, and one of the key updates since that time was the English devolution white paper, which came forward in December 2024, and the subsequent English devolution and community empowerment bill, which was published in July 2025. And what that bill sets out is the distinction between mayoral authorities that are called strategic authorities, and also those that are considered as established authorities, of which there are currently 7 named in England today, and which we would like to become one of them. The key thing that established status gives us, which is pertinent to some of the discussion that we've been having today around resources, is it gives us the opportunity then to be assessed for suitability for single settlement. And single settlement gives the combined authority greater flexibility with the funding that it receives. So although as a region we very much appreciate that we receive additional funding for having a combined authority and certainty, it still is delivered to us via departmental budgets, by themes, transport, housing, and often still with quite specific requirements. But a single settlement allows us to work with government to have even greater autonomy with the funding that comes forward to us. So the process would be that we would submit our application on the 5th of November. That's when we are 18 months old, which is one of the key criteria to submit. We've also set out in your paper how we meet the wider criteria in section 3.10, and we are confident that the East Midlands meets that readiness test for established status, because we've been working on this very hard, or you have been working on this very hard for the last 12 months. So we will submit that in November, and then we would hope to be included within the secondary legislation which would come forward in the summer, which gives us that acknowledged status. We will continue to work and to push with government in the meantime for those flexibilities around the single settlement, although we are not currently expected to receive that funding in this current budget. It is our belief that we should do, and we are ready to, and would certainly benefit from some of those freedoms and flexibilities. So your recommendations are set out in the report, which is to ask you to support the submission, to delegate the respective to respective officers the autonomy to prepare that application, which will then be submitted by the Mayor of the East Midlands on our behalf. So I will pause there.
Thank you. This is a very important opportunity for us, not just to be an established strategic authority, but also I will continue to bang on the door of government, of everybody who will listen to me, that we should have integrated settlement, and we shouldn't be put in the slow lane or kept in the slow lane. We should be given every opportunity to move as fast as we need to move in order to achieve the ambitions that we've just talked about. And so I hope that you will support this application. Happy to do so? Yes. Great. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Let's move on then to the Transport Transition Inter-Authority Agreement Heads of Terms. Richard, come and join us.
Thank you, Mayor Clare, and good morning or good early afternoon, Board. So the paper before you, fairly legalistic paper, but in a nutshell, this Heads of Terms of an Inter-Authority Agreement sets out the key principles upon which we will effect the transfer of public transport services from constituent councils to EMCCA as we are required to do. This, as I'm sure you get a flavour through the paper, is a very significant programme of work being undertaken by EMCCA in very, very close collaboration and joint working with our constituent councils. Essentially, we're taking 4 transport authorities and transitioning them into one that will be run from next year by EMCCA. Whilst we're working clearly very collaboratively, there are certain legal principles that need to be established through the Heads of Terms and then ultimately through an inter-authority agreement that will actually affect the transfer. And this covers all aspects of the programme because not only are we transferring people, we're novating contracts, we are transferring IT systems, we're moving across assets, and we're also changing the financial arrangements in terms of the transport levy, which will ultimately fund the services going forward. So as I say, a really important milestone for the programme in terms of reaching this point. Still a lot of work still to be done, but hopefully you can see here we're making really good progress collectively across EMCCA and the constituent councils.
Thank you. Could I first of all start by thanking the constituent councils for their engagement and cooperation, and there's a huge amount of work which I think those of us who are not transport experts and maybe are coming fairly new to some of this will be surprised at the extent of the detail that is required of the work, and to do something that none of the other combined authorities have needed to do because they are not creating a regional transport authority in the way in which therefore we are at this point. So a really significant piece of work. So thank you to all the constituent councils and their officers for the work that they're doing on this. Are there any questions or comments? Cascan.
How confident are we that this will actually happen before the date? I know it has to happen, but because previously we've had ambitions to do it earlier. I don't know if it was October time we thought we could do it, and then it came that we couldn't. But we've been very clear as a board, though, that even though we know we've got the hard date of 31st, but we didn't want to rush it and make sure it's right. So are you confident now that we will be able to do that if you consider how we've only got 5 months or less?
Yes, thank you. We've done an enormous amount of work over the summer to build the programme discipline that's needed to effect such a transfer across all of the work streams. And we've actually even got almost like a totalizer that's saying how much of the transfer activities are complete. And with that, and giving ourselves a bit more time, because October was, I think, frankly unrealistic to begin with, we're very confident that we will get this over the line in the new year, ready for the backstop date, which effectively when we have to do it, of 31st of March.
Okay. Councillor Rini.
Yeah, whilst I'm not working on the transport team, the report I've got from my officers is that Heads of Terms are agreed. There's a lot of detail work going on, but the information I have here is that we'll be set for the 31st of January for handover. And I'm very pleased to hear that you're taking quite a large number of my staff across, so you'll be lowering my salary bill. So thank you for that.
Not sure it quite works like that. I think, yeah, it doesn't quite work in that way. But however, can I therefore ask you, are you happy to approve this paper? Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving then on to item 11, which is the office accommodation strategy. Can I remind members there are two papers. There is this paper, and then there is a paper which is in our private section, which is commercially sensitive. So I remind you not to refer to anything in the second paper, which is commercially sensitive. This is simply, in this discussion, should you wish to discuss this in broader terms, about the principle and the strategy of an office accommodation move. And I'll ask Richard Williams, who's remained in place, to just present the report.
Yeah, thank you again, Mayor Clare. So, more of an operational matter here, but clearly needs to be bound in terms of an ambition and a strategy for EMCCA's long-term aim of a permanent headquarters within the region. As the paper sets out, we're very conscious that there are still very many moving parts before we can conclude on a permanent HQ location for EMCCA. One of those is, of course, the evolving role and responsibility of EMCCA, so we don't quite know what we'll look like in the next few years. But, of course, the second thing is local government reorganisation, which an experience elsewhere shows is likely to create some churn within the public sector estate. So it would be rather foolhardy, I think, for us to commit to a permanent HQ without taking consideration of all of the other options that may present themselves over the next few years. At the same time, it is the case that we have outgrown our accommodation in Chesterfield, in the NGEC site. It's been hugely beneficial to us to have that site as we started up as an organisation. But frankly, we are now a maturing organisation, and we do need some accommodation that will accommodate our growth. We've only got 52 desks at that NGEC site. We don't have the ability to hold committee meetings, etc., etc. So therefore, the proposal is to delegate to myself and others to secure mid-term accommodation next 4 or 5 years until we decide on the longer-term permanent HQ, but give us that facility in Chesterfield that will accommodate us for that interim period or mid-term period.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on this paper? Oh, Nigat.
Thank you. So, considering we've just approved the transfer of the staff coming from transport, I'm just trying to understand where will officers be based. So I understand the headquarters kind of argument, but if we're talking about regional coverage, so if staff are actually based with us and there's office space, so are we looking at satellite offices where staff that are going to become EMCCA employees actually stay with the local authorities and you just rent space potentially? Is that something you've considered?
Absolutely, it has been something we've considered, and is actually something that we are proceeding on with satellite accommodation in both Derby and Nottingham, but also a focus very much on a mid-term interim HQ in Chesterfield.
Councillor Moon. Oh, sorry, yes.
Can I just come back? Because my concern is you might lose officers who don't want, they're travelling if you think about the region, and for example, coming from Nottingham to Chesterfield, it's not the easiest route, so I'm just concerned if it is a compulsory, you've got to work from Chesterfield, you might lose some excellent members of staff.
Yeah, in fact, actually, it was in the last paper in the heads of terms that it talked about specific offices being kept as part of the heads of terms. Councillor Meany.
Yes, as I said before, I'm delighted that EMCCA have decided to base itself in Chesterfield. In terms of additional space, I've instructed my property officers to reach out to you because I believe we do have surplus accommodation, and I've asked them to liaise with your team to see if we can offer any assistance.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we happy to approve this document, and then we will remove everybody, public and press, and then we'll move on? So, first of all, can I ask for your approval of the recommendations on this? Thank you. Let's just deal with transparent decision making, which is item 12, before we get into the final part.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide additional transparency of decisions that have been taken by the Mayor or officers outside of board meetings, exercising delegated authority. Details of the decisions taken since the last meeting are at paragraph 3.3 of the report, and members will note that there have been 2 officer decisions, no mayoral decisions and no urgency decisions. The decisions that have been taken and confirmed in the report have been published in accordance with EMCCA's publication scheme. Both decisions are key decisions and therefore were subject to call-in. And with that, Mayor, I present the report to board for approval.
Thank you. Happy to approve? Great, thank you very much. So I'm now going to exclude the public and press. The board is requested to consider agree the resolution having been duly proposed and seconded by board members, I hope. Under Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded during the remainder of the meeting on the basis that if they were present during the business to be transacted, there would be a likelihood of disclosure to them of exempt information of the following description: information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the combined county authority, holding that information except information which must be registered under various statutes, such as Companies Act or Charities Act 2011. Financial or business affairs includes contemplated as well as past or current activities. So can I ask the board to conclude that the public part of the meeting is over and that live stream will stop and that we will move into a closed session? Yes. Agreed? Thank you very much.
Live stream finished, Sanjeev.
They're going to confirm. Yeah, they're just going to click.
It's off. Just tell me when.